Welcome to the Nostalgia Test Podcast, the show where two longtime friends put their mainstream pop culture past to the ultimate test, the Nostalgia Test. Well, welcome everyone to another episode of the Nostalgia Test Podcast. I'm Dan Dissinger here in LA, and I'm here with my longtime friend and co-host Manny Coelho there in New York. Manny, how you doing tonight?
Oh man, I'm pumped tonight, Dan.
Yeah.
Tonight, special night. I am pumped. What's up, everybody? If this is the first time at the Nostalgia Test Podcast, this is where two longtime friends put our pop culture past to the test. But tonight is a special episode.
Yeah, awesome episode. Like, we're super psyched. Today we have an amazing guest with us, one of the directors of the Nickelodeon documentary, The Orange Years, Scott Barber. Scott, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We are super excited.
Oh man, the pleasure's all mine. That's cool that Dan, that you're in Los Angeles, Manny, you're in New York, I'm in Texas, so we got like all the time zones represented.
There we go.
East Coast, West Coast, and Third Coast.
There you go.
That's our I love that. Like, this coast, that coast, and here over here.
Yeah,
we can do that type of thing. I'm so glad that we were able to do this, because in normal times, I mean, it would be really tough to kind of even get this together. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what you're up to, and a little bit about the Orange Years.
Yeah, well, my name is Scott Barber, and I'm one of the directors of a recently released documentary called The Orange Years, The Nickelodeon Story. And the name kind of spells it out. It's a documentary about the origin and kind of what I consider the golden years of Nickelodeon, the 80s and 90s. It's a real nostalgic, fun look at some really cool times with some people that were really breaking ground and doing crazy revolutionary things. Adam Sweeney was my co-director on this, and we kind of like to say that our tagline, if you will, is "You fell in love with the shows, now it's time to find out why." So, there's all these shows. We kind of noticed that everybody was super nostalgic for 80s and 90s Nickelodeon. When you talk to somebody about that and you bring it up, people's eyes just light up and they're like, "Oh, remember Hey Dude? Remember Are You Afraid of the Dark? Remember Ren and Stimpy? Remember Double Dare?" There was just this real strong reaction from people of a certain age. And we kind of dive into, why is that? Was it just an accident, or was there something more there? And obviously, I feel that there was something more there. There were some people doing some amazing work to understand kids programming in a really unique way. So that's kind of in a nutshell who I am and why I'm here. Scott Barber of the Orange Years.
Well, Scott, I just got to say, all the lists that you just came up with. So in our podcast, when Dan and I talk about what's the next test we're going to do, you basically, this documentary is basically gave us all this content. I'm like, oh, we got to put that to the test. There's things that I even forgot about. And then as soon as it came on the documentary, I was like singing and humming the theme song to Doug. Like, I hadn't thought about Doug in years. And then I was like, oh my God, like, I loved that show. And like, I was thinking the same thing, like, why? Is it because like the 80s were that good and the 90s were that good? Or was there something else? Like, what was it about the shows? Why were they so good? Are good shows like that now? Are there shows out like that now that are doing to the same things that they did to the kids now, like that they did to us as kids? I don't know, but I was happy you came up. I gotta say, I watched this documentary twice already. I'm probably gonna watch it like 3 or 4 more times because it was just like I was smiling ear to ear the whole time. And then to kind of hear even like how you got the interviews that you got is what I really want to know, because like it was I was like, whoa, Clarissa,
I know.
Whoa, like, I was like, oh my God, that's awesome. Like that you were able to reach out to all these guys and, they were really willing to tell the story, because it was such a great time. It seemed like to work and be part of this whole thing growing up.
Yeah, it is crazy the amount of people that we got, because I've been working on this documentary for so long. We started in 2017. Wow. But sometimes I have to take a step back and go, man, it's crazy how many people from all of our favorite shows we got. We actually had to cut it off. We could have kept going, You know, I mean, realistically, we could have filmed this thing forever and still gotten more and more people. But that was certainly a chore. You know, this documentary it is a total labor of love, a small indie film, a couple of guys with an idea that then got to work with a bunch of other people. You know, other producers came on, other camera people, editors that just liked what we were doing and joined the party. But that's all it was. It's not. There's no big studio behind it. So when Adam and I decided to, do this documentary, and at first I don't think we quite understood how challenging that was really going to be to get that many people. You know, we always joke if we had done a documentary about one movie or one show, you get that cast and crew, 5 to 10 people, and you're good. But we're talking, 20 shows over the span of 20 years. So it was a huge undertaking.
Yeah, go ahead, Manny.
Go ahead, Dan. I spoke too much. Right?
But I was gonna say that, like, when the documentary started for me, and then you had the president, the former president or former CEO or the leader really for Nickelodeon. She was the idea that she had behind Nickelodeon, and the from a teaching background and everything, and to make programming that didn't speak down to kids. I never looked at it that way. But then when you guys like put together the clips of all these shows and how they were created and the types of narratives and things that they were developed, I was blown away, and just, it made sense. Like, it made so much sense that it was like, yeah, these shows didn't talk down to kids. They spoke like to them directly in like their language. And I was really like taken aback from that part. So it was really amazing that you were able to get her to kind of like really open up about that whole kind of development of the Nickelodeon.
Yeah, Geraldine Laybourne was awesome. And we're so grateful that we got to interview her for the doc. And thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me, because that was really our goal, was to explain why was it that these shows connected with you? You know, what was it that was different? And it's something that, as a kid, you didn't think of, because you're a kid. You know, you're just like, oh, I love this show. I love it. And in a way, it's kind of like your parents. You know, you don't really realize how much cool stuff your parents did for you until you become an adult yourself. You know, you're just like, oh, my parents, blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, every single meal that they cooked for me, everything that they did, all the late hours working was all for me. You know, it's like, wow, I kind of treated them like crap, kind of took them for granted. You know, in a way, it's kind of like Nickelodeon. You know, we watched it and we thought it was awesome. And now it's like, we're taking a more journalistic look at why we all of us that are of that age had that same reaction to these shows. Because let's be honest, there are certain things that we like just because it was on when we were little kids.
Right.
You know, I don't want to offend anyone listening, but like Poison is a band that I get happy whenever I hear them. And I know completely full well it's only because it's 80s music, and it's not good. It's just, it reminds me of being a little kid and hearing Poison on the radio, you know? And there's certainly things that we like just because it's from the 80s, and that's when we were kids, and it reminds us of being a little kid. And I just don't feel like Nickelodeon was that. I think that there's something more to it.
So Poison wouldn't pass the nostalgic test. If you put that to the test, I guess, like you would say, it stays nostalgic. It doesn't move past that.
I would say so, but that's just me.
It's funny that you say, like, anytime we were thinking about shows, the fact that Nickelodeon came up so many times, like the roster is just insane. Like, Disney has its own thing. And like, there was a part right in the beginning of the documentary when the logo came up, and I was just thinking in my head before it even came up in the documentary, I'm like, this is like MTV for kids. And then the fact that the guy who did the MTV logo helped with the Nickelodeon logo, I was like, oh my God, that's why I connected that. You know, this was like the, where you went to like get messy and watch crazy shows, where like Disney's like, it's a formula, it's good. And there's always a tearjerker. I don't hate on Toy Stories. I could watch Toy Story for days. That's also Pixar. But like, there's, Disney is Disney, but Nickelodeon was like just so much fun. Like, I just remember anytime Dan will bring up a show, I'm like, oh, that was fun. Like, I almost don't want to put it to the test sometimes, because I'm like, I don't want my childhood to be ruined.
Right.
Don't do that. So I was so happy that
Mm-hmm.
that part came up with the logo and stuff. I really wanted to know was I saw your crowdfunding commercial, if you will, video, which was
Yeah.
awesome because I love that you did like homage to every single show that you liked. Like you had the camp nostalgia instead of
Yeah.
camp.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, that's and you're like the Pete, you had the Pete and Pete setup, like on the thing. You did so good about like setting up the way each show was. And I wanted to know, like the crowdfunding that you got, did you get a good feedback from that?
Yeah, we did. And it's so funny. I still love that goofy crowdfund video, because we were like, how do we convey that what we're trying to do and pull on those nostalgia heartstrings and let people understand what we're trying to do we didn't want to use clips from the shows because at that point we didn't know if we were allowed to.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're like, what if we just recreated it with us?
Yeah.
And it was I shot that, but I was also in it. So it's like I would set the camera up and then go back and then we would edit it and all that stuff. It was crazy. We did get a good feedback. Obviously the crowdfund was successful. And that was one thing Adam and I decided was the crowdfund is a great test. If the crowdfund isn't successful, that means the movie shouldn't be made because nobody wants it. Nobody's into it. It's just us, So, so that was a great thing that let us know that that was the first time we got an inkling that it would be successful. And there were other people out there that would think that this was cool. The one thing that I would urge anybody thinking of doing a crowdfund for a film that we did wrong, and what I think would make your crowdfund even bigger is shoot some of your movie first and then do a crowdfund. Because, when we were showing that we quit showing it to people because they're like, wait, is it a movie about you guys? Are y'all in it? And we're like, no, it's a documentary. We were showing people this video that didn't look anything like the documentary. The crowdfund video is just me and Adam acting goofy. So I wish we had shot like maybe 4 or 5 interviews and edited it together, because ultimately that's what we did do. We took that crowdfund movie, that crowdfund that was successful, that money, and we went to Los Angeles and we went to New York. And we just got a crap ton of interviews, both. We stayed like 5 days in New York, 5 days in LA, and we were just filming like 4 or 5 interviews every day.
Wow.
So, we had like 20 interviews after both of our trips. And then we cut a little fake trailer together before the movie was even out. We just cut a little fake trailer together. And after that, everything was so much easier because when we would show it to people knew what we meant.
Yeah.
They knew what we were talking about because we could show them. And they could see that the film was going to look good. We could light a shot, we could get good audio, and we could edit it, and we knew how to do all that stuff. So we debuted our little fake trailer at New York City Comic-Con in 2017. And that's when it really blew up. That went kind of like, I don't know if you'd call it viral, but, we went from having like 400 or 500 people on our Facebook and Instagram to like 4,000.
Wow.
It blew up and people were talking about it and it was getting written up. So that's what I wish we had done that from the very beginning.
What I was gonna say, did you, when you first started, like obviously some of the interviews aren't linear, but like, did you find out things that you were like, oh my God, we have to put this in it? And like, it just kept building and building and building because of that. Like speaking to, an executive or an old illustrator and you're like, what? Oh, like they did Mighty Mouse? Like and you dubbed it? And Garfield was dubbed? Like my mind was blown and that was not a American show. Yeah.
And it kind of worked out well for us that some of the interviews, for example, Geraldine Laybourne was the last interview. I mean, she's the main interview. It's her story. And she was the last interview that we ever filmed.
Wow.
And that actually worked out well for us because we could have cut the movie. It wouldn't have been nearly as good, but we were actually already cutting the movie. We thought we weren't going to get her. So all of her stuff, there was no stress. We already had all the sound bites we wanted. We were able just to ask her more philosophical questions. We had all the timeline stuff. First Nickelodeon did this, then we did this, then all that stuff that's more just like narration was already done from the other people. So we were able to ask her why instead of when or how. It was like, why did you do that? And her questions were able to be a lot more from the heart instead of from the brain because we already had the brain type stuff.
Wow.
And we also, by that point, we knew so much about her because we had interviewed all these other people about her that we knew exactly what we wanted to ask. Jim Jenkins, the creator of Doug, was also one of the last ones that we did. And he was also somebody that was instrumental in Pinwheel, one of the early shows.
That was amazing.
Do you remember Pinwheel?
I remember Pinwheel. I remember when it was a show on Nickelodeon. I don't remember when the network was just called Pinwheel, and that was it.
Yeah, I only remember when it was a show. Also, when you guys showed the turtle, holy nostalgia. I was born in '81, so I don't even know how old I was when that show was out. But I was like, there was corners of my brain that were like, no, that turtle. I know that turtle.
Yes, totally.
I was like, wow.
I loved that show, and I loved Plus and Minus. I thought they were way cooler than Bert and Ernie because they were like kids, and they had like Pinwheel was kind of like Sesame Street, but it focused more on like imagination than like just learning, just hardcore. Here's your ABCs, here's your numbers, here's addition. It was more imagination. But because of all that other stuff, we knew that he was instrumental in Pinwheel, so we were able to get him to talk about that. So I would say it is kind of cool to do some interviews early and then some interviews later, because then you know where you're missing. Like by the time we did like one final round of interviews where it was like Geraldine Laybourne and Drake Bell and Vanessa Coffey, who was executive producer of all the Nicktoons and is an amazing human being. And then Jim Jenkins, creator of Doug. We interviewed all those like a year later than the rest. So it really helped us fill in. We already knew where the gaps were. So that really helped us.
Her part of the documentary was, I was blown away, to think that, right, it was Rugrats, Doug, and then Ren and Stimpy or something.
Yeah.
Like that trifecta of animation coming out of Nickelodeon. I was just like, you can't get a better, like, you couldn't get three better cartoons. And brand new. And that's the other thing. Like, what was great about Nickelodeon, watching this documentary was just like how much Nickelodeon, it was just all original content, like the original content. It was like an original content machine. It was just like, we're going to make this like ours and just constant. And it was, and the imagination that went into it, but also the freedom to kind of make shows and for creators to like have so much of a say as well. And that collaboration between creator and executive and so on and so forth. And it was like very team oriented. It was really amazing to kind of see that. You don't think that, like, especially with television and movies, that kind of collaboration is happening because it's a moneymaker. This was like,
right,
we're creating something together.
Yeah, they were breaking new ground. They were writing the rules. And that was one thing that we really wanted to stress in the film is, now Nickelodeon is Nickelodeon. It's this big thing. And shows, like Doug and Rugrats, there's lots of cool cartoons. There's Steven Universe, Craig of the Creek, Gravity Falls. And then for adults, there's, Rick and Morty and Bob's Burgers, stuff like that is all over the place now. Really cool animation is going on right now. And Nickelodeon with the Nicktoons is kind of where it started, because before that, the only cartoons there were no cartoons that were kind of for adults and kids at the same time, like Adventure Time and all that stuff.
Right.
And they were the first people to do that. And also to make a cartoon that was really a cartoon and not just a commercial for a toy. That was always, you've got a toy. How do you market this toy? You put a cartoon out. Literally, the cartoon is an afterthought. It was just a way to sell toys. And Nickelodeon was one of the first people to do that. And it's one of those things where you don't think about it now because it's everywhere. It's like, these are the people you have to thank for that.
Yeah. That was one of my favorite parts of the documentary, where they said at first, obviously, like you said, now Nickelodeon's a marketing machine. But like before that, and it speaks to the documentary of why these were the golden/orange years. Like, because they weren't trying to sell us anything. They were just trying to make us just give kids things to watch and be happy about and stuff. And then it's like, that kind of speaks to like why, maybe that's why it was so great, because they weren't thinking about what toy they needed to promote that week or month or year, or what's next, or we got to build the Batman or the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle thing or whatever. So we got to put them in a scuba gear. And it's like, what? And then I thought that was awesome to see. And then all of a sudden see how everyone started to leave once things turned into the marketing machine. And not that they ate it, but it's like, well, inevitably, like it's fine, because like I think about it as a small business that I am. I'm like, we're a small nano brewery. Eventually, like the projection is that you want to continue to get better, bigger and bigger and bigger, and then eventually it's like, well, does your quality go down so you can become more successful, or do you stay where you're at? So it's like, unfortunately, they have investors, and the investors are like,
Exactly.
well, now we're here and we've plateaued. Where do we do now? Toys. And it's like, log. Like, which, by the way, I still think that the log song, I still sing that log song.
It's great.
I mean, come on, how classic is that? You know, it's so good. So the cartoons were sick. They were good. And like you said, Dan, like those three, the trifecta. I love how they say like the Rugrats, they were ugly babies, and they're like, yes, babies are cute, and they all look weird and stuff. And like, I love the drawing, the illustration of it was great. And just like, I can't tell you which of the three I like more though.
That's really hard. That's really hard. They're all great in their own way. And isn't that crazy though? You know, usually you have a couple of missteps and then you hit it big. But literally, Vanessa Coffey said, I think you should make cartoons, your own cartoons. Because like you said, in the early days, Nickelodeon just bought cartoons from other people. Like they played Looney Tunes or Mighty Mouse or whatever. But she said, you should make your own. And they said, cool, go find us some cartoons. And literally the first three were Doug, Rugrats, Ren and Stimpy. Like she hit 3 home runs. Those shows are still huge to this day. If you go into like a Hot Topic or like Urban Outfitters or whatever, like the trendy store is for like young people, those shirts are still there, like still to this day.
Those three I don't think will ever go away.
No,
I don't. I mean,
no.
And then like, Rocco is like considered like the honorary 4th original one because it came out right after those.
Right.
And it's great. But Doug, Rugrats, Ren and Stimpy, that's a perfect example. That show was on Nickelodeon and MTV literally at the same time.
That show was amazing. And I love how they opened up being like, we didn't really know what some of this stuff was, and they were just like throwing these jokes in there that no one knew was like getting past everybody. And I was just like, but as a kid you don't know. Then all of a sudden as an adult you hear these things like, wow, they let that go right through. Like that was happening.
I know, like, totally. It's crazy that and I will plug it. There's a great Ren and Stimpy documentary out there that I think is great. If you like the Orange Years, I think a great companion piece is Happy Happy Joy Joy. It's very different because the Orange Years is very much like a triumphant, like super fun film, get you pumped up, and Happy Happy Joy Joy is much more of a dark, but it's a fantastic film, and it's just about Ren and Stimpy.
Wow. Okay. Wow. I thought it was interesting that they were part of an ensemble of animals, and like, she's like, no, just the dog and the cat,
just these guys,
just those two, like put those into a show. I was like,
that shows you how genius she was. Vanessa Coffey, she first of all, the fact that she could see talent, she could spot talent because of the hundreds of different people that came in. Doug, Rugrats, and Ren and Stimpy, those are the 3 she chose. And she also kind of helped shape them all. Like you mentioned, Ren and Stimpy was originally going to be this huge gang. I think it was called Our Gang. It was either Our Gang or Your Gang. And it was this big group of a bunch of people. And she's like, no. Focus on the cat and dog. And that's something. And obviously she was 100% right, And Rugrats the same way. Those Klasky Chupo is the animation company that created Rugrats. And they went on to do a bunch of other stuff like Real Monsters. They've done 3 or 4 other cartoons for Nickelodeon afterwards. They did the original Simpsons when it was on the Tracy Ullman show.
Oh, whoa. You know what? That makes a lot of sense. That's so now I see that.
And when it got picked up by Fox, they were like, we don't really want to do that. Whoops. I mean, you can look at that either way. Like, but then they also did go on to do their own cool stuff. They had 3 or 4 ideas that that Vanessa Coffey was like, nope. And finally, like, well, I mean, the only other idea we got, we don't even have any drawings or a script. We don't have anything. It's just an idea we came up with, is like a bunch of babies that whenever the adults leave the room, they talk. And she's like, do that. They didn't have, there were no drawings. There were no characters. It was just, that's what they said. It's a show about babies that can talk whenever the adults leave the room. And she's like, boom, go for it. And then look what happened.
Unbelievable. What's funny is, while this is being recorded, we released a new episode today about Guts. And Yeah, and like that too, like we were talking about game shows, like and stuff, and how Double Dare, just like that show was amazing. Mark Summers, first of all,
Yeah.
though, but I just want to say, Mark Summers, the stuff that he said in your documentary, just I laughed out loud every time when he said he ripped the microphones out of that thing,
Oh
and
my gosh, I know. Yeah,
he is gold. He is gold, and
I
I'm so
know.
glad. What was it like? Was he like very? I mean, it seemed like he was very like open and forthright with
Yeah,
your
he
interview.
was awesome. He was great. And what's even cooler is, I mentioned Happy Happy Joy Joy. He's got a documentary that's still coming out.
Wow.
But he was working on it at the same time as us, and he's still doing it. And it's about his life, and it's called On Your Mark.
Oh yeah,
And it
that's funny.
deals with his life. I mean, he's led a crazy life. He was a comedian. He was a magician, and then he was he was on Nickelodeon. It's funny, people either know him as Double Dare or the Unwrapped guy. Like a lot of people really know him from Unwrapped, which is a Food Network show.
Yeah.
And he's dealt with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and now he's doing like a one-man show. He's an amazing guy. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to give you all stuff that's not in my documentary. So you can only imagine like the stuff that he gave us was so gold. What's going to be in his own,
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy because he gave up a lot of things. Like when he talked about the kid who got hurt, I was like, oh,
whoops. Yeah.
I was like, that would not fly nowadays. You want to talk about nostalgia?
Yeah.
We've actually put that Double Dare to the test too on
so
one of our episodes, and we've said it. We said it was so low budget, but so much fun, and how crazy. Like we said that Mark Summers was so like Dan like loves how like quick he was. Like he was like, all right, move on.
He was so quick. And what I think made him so awesome, I couldn't have put this into words as a kid because I didn't understand it, but now looking at it is he treated that game show, Double Dare, the same way you would treat a game show with adults.
Yeah.
He acted exactly the same. It was like he wasn't even talking to a kid. The same way that like Bob Barker or Pat Sajak or Alex Trebek, he put the same professionalism. He wasn't like, okay, little Billy, are you ready to do the physical challenge? He wasn't. He was. I mean, you look at him and you can't even tell he's talking to kids. He's just speaking to them the same way. And that's what made that show so awesome. He didn't wear a wacky costume with a weird bow tie. He just wore regular clothes. And I think subconsciously kids picked up on that of like, oh, you're treating me the same way you would treat my mom or dad. Cool. Like I'll watch you. I'll invest in you.
Yeah. I remember watching it as a kid, and that's what I love that part, because it wasn't like we said in the beginning, like it wasn't talking down to me. It could have been as crazy as it is. Like with all the Double Dare stuff, you like getting dirty, doing these things, throwing ping pong balls and stuff, or spraying people in the face with whipped cream. All that stuff can fly. It doesn't matter because he was just treating everybody, like a person, not like, hey, like you said, like, hey, little Billy, blah, blah. He was just like, welcome to Double Dare. Let's do this.
What do you want to do? You want to take the physical challenge? He was awesome.
The best is how fast, like there was one time in the beginning, we saw some episodes where like if a physical challenge wasn't working, he was just like, move on. Like he just
he's like, okay, you won. It's over. You got
like,
it.
okay, that's good. Move. Like,
Double Dare is one of those shows where I think it does hold up. Absolutely. It's awesome. It's a great show. And they did do a revival. They rebooted Double Dare recently. And I think, I have no idea because I'm not in with Nickelodeon, even though I made this doc. So I don't know why it only lasted a couple of seasons. But if I had to guess, it's just that the culture kind of changed. Kids aren't as into that as we were.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like young kids aren't as into like trivia as we were. And I think some of that is, and again, this isn't good or bad. It's just simply the way it is, is it like, if back in like, let's say you're hanging out with your friends in 1995, and you're like, who is that dude in that movie? Who is that guy in that movie? And none of your friends know. And you're like, I know, it was Steve Buscemi. You looked awesome because you're the guy that knew it. Now it's like, who is that guy in the movie? It doesn't matter because we have the ability to look anything up on our phone. So the idea of having a bunch of knowledge in your brain doesn't really matter. You don't need to. So that's all I can guess is just that it wasn't as, kids don't really connect. I've noticed like my kids, because I have little kids and I watched all the old Nickelodeon shows with them. And for whatever reason, they thought the physical challenges were cool, but they really didn't like the questions. They just didn't care.
Yeah.
They kind of, I watch them zone out at that part.
That's funny you said that. There are times that when Dan and I are doing this thing, we're like, oh, we sound so old. But I'm just like, the way I said it with Double Dare was that there's so much content now that kids could just pick up and just like watch something else. Yeah, like you said, like that.
Yeah.
I didn't think about the question thing. I was thinking more about they've seen gross. They've seen
true.
They've seen this. They've seen so many other things. Kids are doing so many. They'll sit and watch kids play video games. And I'm just like,
yeah.
what? But like, you're right about it's almost like useless knowledge that you had that friend that,
Yeah.
right out the duck. You had that friend that knew everything. Or what I loved about that kind of question of like, who was in that movie or what was that show was that you had about an hour of conversation with your friends trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Now it's hold on. This is it.
Yeah.
No, and then the conversation's over, and then you're not really hanging out with your friends anymore because all you're doing is like, oh, that's a job for Google. And it's like, wait, that's a job for us just to talk. Like,
Yeah.
it gave us like a chance to hang out with each other and be the person, now it's like, I'll just Google it. It's like, what? Like, come on.
It takes the fun out of it for sure. Yeah.
Your whole like social skills get to be like destroyed a little bit because of it. Like no one's like trying to go through the 6 degrees of like,
no,
he was in that. No, I think he was that's not the same guy. That's not the same.
Yeah.
So guys, if you like Nostalgia Test podcast, please don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yeah, subscribe and like
Follow us on all social media outlets that you can find us and where you can get podcasts: Podbean, Spotify, Apple.
Well, Scott, did you ever go to the Nickelodeon studios in Universal?
No, I never did. I wish I could have, especially now after working on the doc and watching all these other people. One of our producers, Sean Coffin, he did go. And he filmed it. So we used some of his footage in the movie. So watching his vacation and stuff, it's like, oh, damn it. I wish I could go, but I never got to.
Wow, that's what that was. Because I was wondering, I'm like, I wonder where they got some of this footage. And that's amazing that was like home video. So
we got it all over the place. Like we got it from like old promos. And then we also, like, I would just find YouTube. And if I saw somebody with some cool clips, I'd email and be like, hey, can I use some of your clips in my movie?
Wow.
The majority of them are always like, yeah, sure, I don't care, just throw me up in the end credits and you can use whatever you want.
That's awesome. I always wanted to go. I remember, and I never went to Universal Studios, and I was like, oh man, I can't wait to go there and try to. There was a thing with me, and you probably found this out, that I told Dan, I was like, most of the kids on the show are probably actors that just needed like extras that needed the job. And I was like, did real kids actually go on the shows? Did they? Yeah. I was like questioning it. I was like, that kid was probably trying to get a job on a commercial and they were like, hey, go on Double Dare. And I was like, I can't believe that they're real. So were they, I guess they were real, like kids?
Yeah, like the contestants on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were just regular kids.
Well, I know that there was the episode that Mark was like, we're live on Double Dare and you could come here too and audition. And I was like, wait, that was real? Like I literally thought it was just, some actors who needed work. So.
There probably were some people that wanted to get into show business that were trying to get on the show for that. Like AJ McLean from Back's NSYNC, one of those bands. He was on an episode of Guts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can look it up. If you look up like AJ McLean, I think it's McLean. I always say it wrong. But he was on an episode of Guts. So maybe that was because, he had an agent like, oh, you should go on a game show. Anything to be in front of the camera.
Well, sure. It's like some of the people from some of the other shows too on Nickelodeon were on like Hidden Temple or Arcade, which when I saw the clips from Arcade from Nickelodeon, I was just like, it just brought me back immediately. I was like, oh wow, that's how they did that. Like everything was on a blue screen and you had to, it was just amazing how they thought these things up to kind of even create some. And Hidden Temple, I have to say, is probably one of the greatest game shows have to be like ever created, like ever. Like that was one of the greatest things I've ever seen.
But it's funny what Scott said about the trivia thing. I think that show won't hold up right now because kids would just be like, I just want to see them run through the temple I don't want to solve all these questions and stuff. Cause like there was a lot of questions in the Hidden Temple thing.
There were, yeah.
Cause I've seen a couple episodes because Dan, I wanted to put it to the test one time. I'm like, let me just watch this. I'm like, whoa, like there's a lot to just to get to the temple. It's like,
yeah, there are.
It was great though.
Some of the other stuff when we were talking about how like kids nowadays, like whether these things will, resonate with them. And I think about some of the original live action like original shows that they created. And I'm like trying to think like what would Clarissa Explains It All like translate, like, because I mean that show was great. Melissa Joan Hart, like the interview you guys did with her really opened up like this whole world of that show. And also how all of these kind of shows also, and how diverse the casts were, and how a lot of the shows were led by girls as well as the main characters. And it was like telling these other stories that we weren't getting. And nowadays, like you kind of see like almost like a scale back on that. And almost like when I saw Clarissa, I was like, it almost reminded me of Blossom in that idea of like she's telling her story, she's breaking the fourth wall, and it's like, but she's also, like I just said, like she's not interested in the kid that's climbing through her window. She's like an independent feminist. Like when they said like Clarissa Explains It All is a feminist, I was like, that makes so much sense. That was like such an eye-opening like moment in the doc.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that was an important show. And I think that's funny that's another example of how Nickelodeon just broke all the rules. Nowadays it's all about a formula and buzzwords. Like even in the limited experience I've had, people like, you could tell they're taking like, when we're trying to sell the Orange Years, people like nostalgia, 90s, Nickelodeon, they put that into a computer and see how much money they can make out of it, whether or not they want to buy it. And they did the opposite of that back then, where it's like Clarissa Explains It All. Like everyone was saying this show is going to fail because everyone back in the day said boys will not watch a show where a girl is the main character. They just won't. And that was like the rule. That was like the rule of kids programming. And Nickelodeon was like, yeah, they will. Specifically, Geraldine Laybourne and her team were like, yeah, they will. They will. They just, you've never tried it. You've never made a good show. That's the problem. Let's do it. Let's make a badass show. And boys will totally watch it. And I totally did. I loved Clarissa. I loved Alex Mack. Both of those shows I loved. And I never even thought about it as a young boy. I was never like, oh, I'm watching a girl show. I never even thought of it like that. Like, yeah, it was amazing. And it's awesome.
Yeah, it's funny how like when Geraldine, her approach to everything, I think for me the thing that stuck with me the most was her approach, like her confidence and the way she just was like, we're doing this no matter what, right? Like doing this. And it really put like for me right up front being like, well, without her, this doesn't, like there's no way that these things happen. Like she really had a vision.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You just move forward with that.
100%. It wouldn't have happened without her, and we show that what Nickelodeon was like before that, where it was kind of like a low budget PBS. It was on its way out. and really, whenever we were doing research, when we found out about her pretty early, because she's a huge part of Nickelodeon. But when I realized that the same person was president and responsible for You Can't Do That on Television, which is one of the first shows I ever saw all the way back in the early 80s. All the way through all that and Keenan and Kel, it was the same person guiding it through all of that. That's when I was like, oh my God, I really want to do this movie. That's whenever I got really excited about it. I was like, I really want to do this movie. I really want to tell this person's story because that's freaking crazy. Like she shaped a whole generation. There was nothing like that before. And really, I mean, there's nothing like it afterwards. But you can definitely see how much stuff was influenced by her for sure.
Oh, yeah. Even Pete. When you were showing clips of Pete, and I think there was a description of it being like a Twin Peaks type of. Yeah, I was just like, holy, yes, it totally. Yeah, it was just the way it kind of like played out. Those two guys too, like that interview was really awesome because it really explained a lot, but also like it just showed how much imagination and being imaginative and free. Yeah. Was so important to making these shows successful.
When you think about it, when you say I love 80s and 90s Nickelodeon, or even just 90s, let's just say 90s, I love 90s Nickelodeon. What does that even mean? Like Pete and Pete, which is this very surreal, like Wes Anderson and Twin Peaks had a baby. It's just very weird show. Are You Afraid of the Dark, which is like a horror show, Ren and
God.
Stimpy, which is like a weird demented cartoon, Salute Your Shorts, which is kids at camp, Clarissa, Double Dare, Nick Arcade. None of these shows are like each other at all.
No.
You know what I mean? That's I think the beauty of when you say I love 90s Nickelodeon, it means so many different things, because they definitely did not have a pattern that they continued. All of those shows are totally different. Like, find any two shows that were similar. There's not. They're all different. They were constantly trying new things. They weren't like, oh, let's do we did a show about Clarissa, let's do a show about another girl, like, or oh, we got a show like that's kind of like about horror, let's do another horror show, or like it was always different, because I mean, even the two shows that really from that point that had really strong female leads, Clarissa and Alex Mack, those shows are nothing alike. Clarissa was like a multicam sitcom about an everyday girl. Alex Mack was like a single cam, more cinematic show about a girl that was like a superhero. That's kind of had action, mystery. I mean, those shows were nothing alike. None of the shows were anything alike. They were always doing something different. That's what blows me away the most.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I was really happy that you got a lot of people from All That and Keen Show. I was like, wow, like that. Oh, what's his name? No, Keenan. You got Keenan
Thompson. Yeah.
Like, this guy is like right now on Saturday Night Live, killing it on Saturday Night Live. When he came on Saturday Night Live, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so happy for him. And it was because like I knew him growing up. Like, I felt like I was friends with him. I would be watching those shows all the time. And I'm like, I was so happy to see him in Saturday Night Live. I'm like, he belongs there. Like, this guy was a genius growing up. And now he's there. And the fact that he sat, I was like, he must have really been happy to sit down, because he's got to know that his career is because of Nickelodeon. Like, Nickelodeon helped him be where he is right now.
I mean, the first thing I have to say is Kenan Thompson was just the nicest person. Like, it's so refreshing whenever good things happen to good people, and that guy, like you said, he's blowing up now. He's got his own TV show, He's been on Saturday Night Live longer than anybody in the history of SNL. I mean, he just hosted the Kids' Choice Awards on Nickelodeon. To get to sit down with him and talk with him on our very small indie film, was amazing. And he was so nice and so gracious. I could not say enough good things about him. And I think that also shows the power of Nickelodeon. There are people like Kenan Thompson, who's one of the biggest stars in the world. Christine Taylor, who, was married to Ben Stiller, was in the Brady Bunch movie, Dodgeball, huge A-list star. Graham Yost, who wrote for Hey Dude, who went on to write Speed, Band of Brothers.
I know. It's crazy.
Anne Sweeney, who is like one of the higher ups at like Netflix now and like lives in a huge mansion. All of these people like could have easily been like, hey guys, good luck, but I don't have time for a little small documentary for free. I can't do that. Melissa Joan Hart, she's still killing it. She was directing an episode of The Goldbergs whenever we interviewed her.
Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, it shows you how powerful Nickelodeon was, that all of these really powerful, important, successful people were still willing to talk about it because it meant that much to them. Just the same way it meant something to us watching it, it meant so much to them for getting to be a part of it.
That feels really good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm really happy you said that they're still, like, I wanted to ask you, like, did you have to talk to Nickelodeon and tell them that you're doing a documentary?
So, yeah, the funny thing is there's something called fair use that we researched. We read a book on it and we talked to some other people. And then we actually hired the guy who wrote the book to be our lawyer.
Really?
It's called fair use. And I think it's one reason why like documentaries are really booming right now is you can make a documentary on anything and show clips from it. And you just have to cite fair use. And you there are laws like how long you can play clips, and you have to get a lawyer to sign off on it and get insurance. So it's not like it's super easy, but it's certainly easier than paying like $30,000 for every 5-second clip, like you see how many clips we use in the movie and they were all fair use, fair use.
Really?
Like I said, we did have to pay for a lawyer to sign off and say, I approve and say that this is all fair use. And then we had to get insurance for that as well. So it It wasn't totally easy, but it was easy compared to, like I said, paying thousands of dollars for hundreds of thousands of dollars. But one of the things that they told us was, just because you legally can do something, just because you legally can do it, doesn't mean that you should be like a jerk about it, you know? So they said, we always recommend you reaching out to people first and saying, this is what we're doing. We're doing it. Do you want to be a part of it? If not, no big deal. I just want to let you know that I'm doing this. So we sent Nickelodeon an email just saying like, hey, we're doing this. Love to have you be a part of it. And they were just like, didn't even respond. They're like, yeah, whatever.
They're like, we sell GAC now. No.
Yeah, exactly. But what's funny is, there was a happy ending there because, they just kind of didn't really care about us and threw a couple of weird things our way. And then at the very end, a guy named Brian Robbins became the president of Nickelodeon. Right as our movie was wrapping up, Brian Robbins, who was a writer on All That, became the president of Nickelodeon. And he's one of the biggest Jerry Laybourne fanboys of all time. Under his watch, Double Dare came back, All That came back, and now Rugrats is coming back, and Are You Afraid of the Dark has come back. So clearly he has reverence for the Orange Years. And he reached out to us and was very nice and was like, I think this is cool. I'm glad that you guys are doing it. I just want to let you know there's no opposition from us. Like, we support what you're doing. And that was huge. That's
because, huge. Yeah.
When you're trying to sell this movie, there are people like Hulu that buy, I mean, I know now that Hulu is owned by Disney or whatever, but before that, like everything's owned by Disney now.
I was going to say, what is not owned?
What is not, but like there are places that buy stuff from Nickelodeon that have a working relationship with Nickelodeon that maybe would be hesitant to do business with us because like, if I buy this unauthorized Nickelodeon story, is Nickelodeon going to get mad at me and not want to sell to me or something like that? So being able to go into meetings with distributors and streaming platforms saying, the president of Nickelodeon, Brian Robbins, is totally cool with this. He gives his stamp of approval. It meant a lot to us. So it started out somewhat antagonistic and ended up like super positive and awesome.
Did you just do this since 2017? Are you working like your production company? You guys obviously have a production company, or is it both of you guys, or just a group of you guys that have this production company?
Yeah, this film was kind of interesting. It was like a bunch of different people that all have their own stuff going on came together to work on this. So we all have our own stuff, and we all pretty much have day jobs. So we were doing this in our off time, for sure. I luckily, I have a day job that is in the same business, shooting and editing. So that made it really easy and really flexible for me to be able to do the movie.
Wow.
That's cool.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was good because I was like, man, there's no way they were surviving just on crowdfunding. And
yeah, no way. I mean, we got we got $12,000 from that crowdfunding.
Oh, wow.
Not a lot.
Jeez, man.
And honestly, the majority of it was legal fees. Because like I said, you fair use, it's cheaper than buying the clip. Because realistically, I have a good friend. I don't want to say good friend. I'm a fan of this guy, and now I know who he is. So I consider him a friend, even though he might say something different. He's like, oh yeah, that little nerdy Nickelodeon guy. But a guy named Randall Lobb. Randall Lobb is just a fantastic director. He directed a movie called Turtle Power, which is a documentary about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And he also directed a He-Man documentary called Power of Grayskull.
Wow.
And he's just
both of those.
They're great. They're great. Turtle Power is great. Turtle Power is so much better than the Toys That Made Us episode.
Oh, really?
Turtles. It's like that, but like times
even better.
A million. Way better. Okay. Yeah. Randall Lobb is a super talented guy. Anyway, I talked to him, and he did his documentary before fair use kind of was becoming more mainstream. And he was telling me, like, because, he had to play clips from the cartoon, the Ninja Turtles cartoon. He had to play clips from the Ninja Turtles movie, from, Universal, all this stuff. And he was like, I mean, it was like crazy amounts of money for like a 5-second clip. He was paying like so much money. Whereas, we just paid a lawyer one fee to go over it and say, and you look at the movie. I mean, we play clips left and right.
You do.
We play so many clips, and we didn't have to license them. But we did have to pay a hefty fee because we wanted a good lawyer and travel. I mean, travel and legal fees were mainly what we did because, we shot it. We used all of my equipment to film it for the most part. There were some times where we hired another camera person, but and we just stayed on people's couches, and used whatever location we could. We were really scrappy. I'm really proud of how much we did with so little. But yeah, I mean, $12,000. Yeah, there's no way 2 or 3 people could live off that for a couple of years, especially, like I said, the majority of it went right to travel and lawyers. That's where pretty much all that money went, because we went to Los Angeles twice. We went to New York once. We went to Canada once.
Wow.
And we went to Toronto and Ottawa. And then we took a special trip to Nashville, and then we took a special trip to Georgia, and that was it. But
you guys are like are you guys like close friends?
Yeah, Adam Sweeney and I, we were friends back when these shows were on. We watched those shows together. Wow. It was a big, that was kind of why we wanted to do it. Yeah. So it was a blast.
And you're both in film, or you just like only you are and he does other things?
Yeah, we both were. Adam's a really talented journalist and a really talented writer, and I shoot stuff and I edit. And that's kind of why we decided we wanted to do a documentary. Was it kind of seemed like it could put both of our skills to good use. And so we kind of used our skills together to.
This is your first documentary?
It was my first feature-length film I've ever done. Both of us.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
Scott, this is an amazing feature-length film.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was blown away by it. Blown away. I just want to the clips, the way you set it up, like the everything, the storytelling of it is it's so good. It's like unbelievably good.
I love that you got that story from Keenan about Coolio.
Oh my gosh!
Oh my god!
Oh, that was the greatest story. And then Coolio, and then you got Coolio. Like, to me, like, I think, like we keep saying it, that's the power of that moment of Nickelodeon. That I know. Like, of course, I want to talk about that. That was like,
to kind of tack on to that point, Nickelodeon didn't talk down to kids. All that was very much like a Saturday Night Live or In Living Color, but for kids. But the musical guests they got were still adults. It's not like they were getting little kids. Like, okay, we got to get Hanson and Another Bad Creation, and that's all we could get as little kids. Like they got. I mean, it was like freaking Coolio, TLC, people like that, like legit, like grown up adult people. The fact that we got Coolio was so amazing.
That's awesome.
Like, that shows you the power. We hit him up and we're like, hey man, you want to be in this Nickelodeon documentary? Like, he's done so many other things with his life. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think that like when Weird Al has parodied one of your songs, you're legit Americana. Like you are a big deal if Weird Al parodies you. And he's had a Weird Al parody his song. And we just hit him up and we're like, hey man, we see you're going to be in LA. Can we do a quick interview about Keenan and Kel and all that? And he's like, yeah, man, I'm going to be at my hotel from about this time to this time. Swing on by and we'll just do it. And he totally did it. He just was like, yeah, come on by. That's fine.
Dude, that's awesome. Did you just
so nice.
Did you be like, yo, can you sing Gangsta's Paradise? Just
I know, right?
That's amazing. Wow.
What a cool guy, I mean,
cool. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, that story with Dan, like you said, that story was great when he's like, that all kids around and you smell like a billowing of marijuana.
Yeah. The kid to kind of tack on to that story, it's not in the movie, but they talked. Keenan and Lori Beth both talked about that a little bit more. Is all that the cast members were a pretty wide gap from like the oldest to the youngest, and also not just that, but it's where every year counts. Like you think about it, there might have been some people that were like 12 or 13 when they were on all that, and then some people might have been like 17 or 18. That's very different. That's a very different point in your life, and you could tell like. The little kids are like, what's that smell? And the older kids are like, oh, I know what that is.
Yeah.
Like they said there was this very clear line between the kids that were like young, were like, what's that weird smell? Did a skunk get in here or what? And like the older kids are like, oh, it was almost like a rite of passage. Like, do you know what that smell is? Yes or no? What's that weird smell coming from Coolio's dressing room? If you know what it is, you're officially a cool kid.
That's hilarious. That's amazing. Oh my God. Wow. I can't believe you got that interview just like that. Just like, wow.
I can't either. And one thing I got to give props to so many people because, I feel like it's always like the directors of movies that get propped up. And the analogy that I use for this movie is that Adam and I are kind of like Sam and Frodo. I don't know if you guys are Lord of the Rings fans. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings dork, but like Sam and Frodo, it started out as a small thing in the Shire. But then we quickly got a fellowship of all these other amazing people that worked on it. You know, one of the first people that came on board was a guy named Sean Cauthen. He's another Texas guy. Adam and I are both from Texas. And another Texas guy named Sean Cauthen was like, hey, I see what you're doing. Like, y'all need somebody else. I'm really good with the camera. And he had worked on some TV shows like MTV and stuff like that. And we're like, yeah, sure. Come on. He seemed like a real cool dude. Like, so we're like, yeah, come on, man. Let's do it. Let's bring you on. And I learned so much from him. He really was. He's credited as our cinematographer. I mean, he really did so much more than that. But he's credited as our cinematographer because he kind of shot the most of it and kind of set the vibe for how it was going to look. And he's one of the first people. And then I saw a documentary, a guy named Tommy Avalone, who's become a real good friend of mine. Again, I would consider him, Tom, if you're listening, I consider you a good friend. I hope you consider the same of me. But Tommy Avalone had worked on a documentary called Ghost Heads. That's about Ghostbuster fandom and Ghostbusters the movie. Wow. And Tommy couldn't work on the documentary because he was working on something that was kind of competing. And I wish with all my heart I could have worked with Tommy, but I am working on a doc with Tommy now. Nice. And I swear I won't go off on any more tangents. But
and that's a nostalgia test tangent.
Tommy introduced
it's okay.
the two other guys
here.
to two other guys who are much like Dan and Manny, you guys, on both coasts. One was a New York guy and one was an LA guy who both worked on Ghost Heads with him. Lee Leshin and Bill Parks. They came on board as producers. So when we were in LA, Bill kind of helped us out. And when we were in New York, Lee kind of helped us out. And those guys helped us out a lot. Yeah. And when we interviewed Elisa Reyes, who was awesome. She was on all that. She's amazing. She's like, hey guys, I want in. And we're like, what do you mean? She's like, I don't want to just be interviewed. I want to be part of this. This is good. Nobody had asked us that before that. She was the first person to do it. And she goes, I want to be a producer. Let me come on board and I'm going to help you. And so we're like, okay, cool. Yeah. Like help us book some interviews. Like not even joking. The next day she's like, hey, I talked to Kenan Thompson, Kel Mitchell, Larissa Olenek. That's Alex Mack, Phil Moore. They're all close personal friends of mine. And they all said they'll do it.
Like, dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
No, man, it takes a village to make a film. It does.
All those people, they helped us out so much. And then Lee Leshin, once we had that trailer cut that I was telling you about that debuted at New York City Comic-Con, he's like, hey, can I show this to my friend Adam F. Goldberg? Can I show it to him? And we're like, you mean Adam F. Goldberg from like the show The Goldbergs? And he's like, yeah, he's a friend of mine. I worked on him on another documentary called Back in Time. And we're like, yeah, you can definitely show him. And then Adam F. Goldberg came on board as an exec producer. And then it was like, oh, we're cooking with gas now.
Wow.
Yeah, man. Awesome. It was like a snowball effect. It like really rolling down a hill, like just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah. And then, you know, when we came time to edit it, you know, I'm an editor. That's what I consider myself first and foremost. I love to edit. But I also knew I'd never edited something of this magnitude before.
Right.
And I also knew, you know, this was a challenge because we got to move quickly, but not too quickly. It was like, this is really difficult here because we got to give every show its day in the sun, but we also got to move pretty quick because, you know, it's got to be like 90 minutes, 120 minutes max.
Well, especially nowadays.
Especially nowadays. Everybody, if they want to buy your doc, everyone wants it to be as close to 90 minutes. There was a guy I was a fan of named Bradford Thomason who had directed a documentary called The Rock-afire Explosion that was all about Showbiz Pizza. And then he'd also... Yeah, it's great. And then remember how they had that animatronic band? It's a fantastic doc. And then he had also directed a documentary about Glow, the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling.
Oh, wow.
And I was just a big fan of his editing style because he knew how to take things that were kind of nostalgic and pop culture-y, but not make it feel like the toys that made us or something like that. Like could make it feel a little more artistic, a little more, you know, like a real piece of art. He was good at that. And so he came on board and helped us edit it, and it was awesome. He was immense. So I got to work with a lot of mentors of mine, and I got to meet a lot of new friends. And like you said, it takes a village, and we worked with a lot of amazing people. Our opening credits, if you get to see that, they look awesome. That was Bradford's wife, Allie Clark. Wow. She did that all herself, and it looks awesome.
Yeah, I would say like this doc has so much heart to it. You could tell like everything is just so. Like it hits the nostalgic heartstrings, but it's past that. Like it's got a lot of heart. You know what I mean? And the one thing that really stood out to me too was even that you guys even didn't leave like almost anything out. Like you touched on Nick News, and that
Oh,
part of
that
the
story.
documentary, it will stay with me, I think,
Me too.
forever,
Yeah.
because that shows me too that just Nickelodeon itself
Yeah.
was not afraid to
Yeah.
do anything.
Yeah.
And let's talk about this issue, and let's like do it like
For
way
real.
better than the adults are doing it. Like
Yeah.
way
Yeah,
better
man.
than the adult world is doing it. And that part was
Yeah.
really great. I'm glad
That
you put that in there.
that little chapter, Nick News is always the show people joke around about, like, yep, when Nick News came on, that was time for me to go outside or go do something else. And I think it's funny because it's not a lot of people's favorite show, but I think that part is really the heart of our movie. That's the heart and soul of our movie. So I hope it makes people view Nick News in a new light.
Yeah.
Oh, you definitely did that to me because I did the same thing. I'm like, Nick News? There was Nick News. And then that clip of Magic and
Yeah.
the little girl stole, like,
Crazy.
I'm like, what?
Right.
Like, I took a second and I was like, oh my God. Like, they did this on TV.
On TV, yeah.
This was a thing. And like Dan, like you're saying, like, they were doing it better than the adults were doing it.
They talked about some heavy stuff that kids absolutely need to learn about, because the childhood is like that. It's over. And those people are the adults that are.
Yeah.
I have a nephew that's completing basic training in the Army this month, and
Wow.
it seems like just yesterday I was like putting him on my shoulders. Now he could put me on his shoulders, and it happens like that. You know what I mean? And all the kids that are watching these shows, Nickelodeon knew in just a few years, these are going to be the people that are like calling the shots in our country. And they wanted them to be as well equipped to handle the world as they could.
Wow.
And thank God. I mean, they did a great job. I think they did.
No, they did a great job.
Yeah.
I've loved
Wow. I'm
Yeah,
blown
I got it. This is such a great doc. There's so much that you could have done. This, I'm sure, like you could probably do a doc for each show that you went over.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So-
I mean, they could be a whole doc just on Keenan and Kel, because
I know.
Kel too. Like, I mean, his choices for the character he created, and then went on to be Good Burger and all that stuff was really amazing to hear him talk about that. You never think that these things are happening in the backdrop, especially when you're watching in the 90s and you're kids and stuff. But then returning to it with like a new perspective and new eyes really makes you think like there was so much more happening here, and these kids were like making choices for their
right.
developing.
I mean, the fact that when he talks about that, Ed is probably one of the most iconic characters of 90s Nickelodeon.
Amazing.
I mean, really, I struggle to find a character that's more, when I think of like all that or any of that stuff, I mean, that's the character. Welcome to Good Burger, home of the Good Burger.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
it's so good. And the fact that they let him kind of make that character up. I mean, come on. That's amazing. Like, what other network is going to be like, hey, you're 16. Why don't you create a character? Everyone else is like, hey, you're 16. You're going to do what I tell you to do. That's what everybody else was doing and is doing to this very day.
Yeah, I mean, you said it earlier in the beginning of the podcast. You said it was all about creativity.
Yeah,
Nickelodeon. Like what Disney is all about. It's a formula.
It's like, just different.
And learning.
Yeah.
And like, or other programs, like, and this was all about like, we're gonna let you create this.
And the kids seemed like kids that you would hang out with, that could be your friends, And that's the biggest difference. Disney Channel, I give props to all those kids on the Mickey Mouse Club because they're fantastic entertainers. They're all triple threats. They can sing, dance, act, do it all, and look and are perfectly handsome and beautiful, and that's great. That there's something to be said. Sometimes you just want to be entertained, sing and dance, and let me watch you. But that can also make some kids feel like crap, when you're overweight or underweight, or you're way shorter than everybody else, way taller than everybody else. You have acne, and you're looking at these perfect kids. It can sometimes make you feel like crap. So that's why I'm just glad there were options. Some kids I'm sure really love Mickey Mouse Club. But Nickelodeon, if a kid had a zit, they let the kid have a zit. They weren't going to try to put makeup on it to cover it up. Because guess what? Kids have zits.
Yeah. That's what I mean. I wanted to be at Camp Anawana. Like,
oh my God, me too.
That's right. I wanted to be there. And it's funny, and like when Manny and I do this podcast, what's funny about my childhood is that Nickelodeon and all these shows, I've seen these shows. They're part of my memory. They're a big part of my life. While at the same time, my family didn't even have cable, which meant that like even the impact of Nickelodeon was so heavy that and so positive and big on my life when I didn't even have cable to watch it, but I had to watch it at my uncle's house, my cousin's house, my friends' houses, like that it was on when I was there, or I was putting it on when I got there. So that meant that like it was amazing to kind of sit and watch the documentary and be like, I remember all this even without cable in my house at all. And that really,
Crazy.
I think that really hit
That
me.
is crazy, Dan. I didn't even think about that. Like,
Yeah.
that's how deep it was. Like, it's like the water. It was like the water cooler talk for kids. Like, you come to school, you probably heard like, "Oh, you see that on Nickelodeon?" And it's like, "Yo, you got to come over." Like, I haven't come over. Like,
100%. You know, like Snick was absolutely like, you know, everybody would watch it on Saturday, and then on Monday you'd be like, "Did you see that kid freaking with the monkey's paw bringing his parents back to life? That shit was nuts." You know, absolutely. You know?
Yeah. Wow.
oh man,
Wow.
Are You Afraid of the Dark always remind me of when you got older. It was like Tales from the Crypt.
Yep.
Like it was like that style. You know,
and it was crazy. You know, and to kind of go back to how Mark Summers just acted like a regular adult game show host, and how all that had adult people like Coolio. Are You Afraid of the Dark? It was scary. Those shows didn't have.
Yeah, they didn't hold back. That was literally a nightmare machine. Like you were going home, you were going to bed, and you were being like, "Oh my god, why did I just watch that?" But you wanted to watch it.
Yeah, if you can, the Tale of the Dead Man's Float, you can watch clips of that. There's like a monster that comes out of the water, and it's just as scary as stuff that was on, you know, Tales from the Crypt or any of the Creep Show, any of that stuff. Wow. And a lot of them, like I said, the kids didn't win in the end. The kids would get killed by monsters at the end, and there you go. That's how it you know, that's crazy that nobody was like, "Oh, we can't do that. We got to have that. Make sure you can have some stuff that's a little spooky, but then you got to have the kids be okay at the end and make sure, like, no, this was full on. We want kids to really have something that the same thing as the adults have. That's just nuts."
And then they're gonna go watch Ren and Stimpy, and then while Ren is like banging himself in the head with a hammer trying to get.
Oh my gosh, I know
all that stuff was just like unbelievable. I was
What just a quick, and then this is probably a Google thing, but I'm just gonna ask you because you probably know.
I hope so.
SpongeBob was a Nickelodeon, right?
Yes.
Is a Nickelodeon.
Absolutely.
That was after the Orange Years, or like kind of like it was kind of like it comes from that.
Yeah, and what I kind of found was that SpongeBob was the turning point. That's whenever it quit being this quaint, small. I mean, it wasn't small; it was big, but it was still small enough that they could do crazy stuff. They could still experiment. And SpongeBob, whenever they created SpongeBob, that was their Mickey Mouse. At that point, they were on par with Disney every bit. You know, they were right there.
Yeah.
And so everybody, you know, like you said, you got investors. It wasn't the creators' fault. It was you have investors and money people that are like, make me 5 SpongeBobs. Like, we're not going to be doing this other Pete and Pete, Are You Afraid of the Dark, this little stuff. I need stuff that can be made into toys and plush animals and rides and video games and movies, like that can be a multi-franchise like SpongeBob. They were always trying to create another SpongeBob after that. But SpongeBob itself was created from the same pure place that Ren and Stimpy and Doug. They weren't trying to do that when they created SpongeBob. They were just trying to make another cool show.
If you remember the first couple of like seasons, it looked very low budget, like it was just fun. And then now, I mean, although I'm not talking down on SpongeBob.
Yeah, no, I think
even as an
SpongeBob
adult, I think it's a great show. But like, yeah, you could see the power of, I guess, greed is what I say. You know,
right? It's more the effect that it had after that, because SpongeBob became such a big hit. There was no room for these little weird shows anymore. You know, and it's just the way it is.
Dan and I don't have kids, so I do have nieces and nephews. And what are your kids? Are your kids watching Nickelodeon, Nick Jr.?
They are to an extent. Yeah. What I think is interesting is the way that we watch media is so different. Like, we're experiencing at the same time. Like, I actually had to think about which shows that my kids watch are Nickelodeon shows, because they watch them on Netflix or Hulu or YouTube.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
There are some Nickelodeon shows that they definitely do watch, and I think are really good. It's just different now, you know? And I have a theory about that, because, you know, being in film and production. Like, I always wondered, I was like, why the heck do my kids watch these YouTube videos with no production quality? You know, it looks like it's just filmed on the web or like a phone or something like that, and it's edited so poorly, and it's just got stock music behind it. Like, really, they liked it. Like, they rather watch YouTube than a real show. And I was like, why is that? And then whenever I did this documentary, I realized that the reason kids watched Nickelodeon was because they wanted to watch kids that looked like them and reflected them and were real. Well, all kid shows now are about kids that are secretly a genius. You know, they secretly are a pop star, or the kids on these shows don't look like real kids. We're kind of back to Mickey Mouse Club. They're all perfect and pretty and overly talented. And so kids, when they watch the live action shows on Disney and Nick, I don't think they see themselves at all. They see something phony. And so that's why they watch YouTube, because YouTube is kind of like Nickelodeon. It's by kids for kids on their own terms. Those shows are just real kids. It feels authentic. It's just a kid playing with their toys or unwrapping something or playing video games. But it's just like, hey, you look like me, so I'm connecting with you.
That's huge. Yeah, that's a great observation. Yeah, because my nephew does watch someone play Play-Doh, and I was laughing, like, what? And I'm like, yeah, and then he wants to go buy Play-Doh, but like, he's watching this woman, well, she's probably like 18, 19. She unpacks it, and like, he's watching it. And now that you're saying it, like, it's exactly like a low budget show.
It's like a low budget Nickelodeon was. Show. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and in the beginning of the documentary, you mentioned even Nickelodeon started, they used to have crazy kids jumping out of planes and doing this. And like, kids were like, I'm not into this. Like,
it made them feel horrible. Great. Yeah. It made, like it made them feel,
they felt terrible.
It made them feel terrible. Instead of, it does inspire you kind of, but it also is like,
yeah. Like, my parents can't afford a plane.
Like, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, right. It's like, I can like have an imaginary friend, or I can maybe go to camp, or I can just be a kid at school, and that's what I can do. So like, yeah, like that's why maybe a show like Pete and Pete or Clarissa, like they hit those spots, because it's like, oh, I can literally walk through the hallways in my school or walk out my door, and there's that person, right? Or someone that's like that. And also like the creators, like they're creating from those spaces. When like, I mean, not to jump all the way back to Doug, I mean, but when I saw the creator of Doug, and I was like, that's Doug.
Yeah.
Like, Doug. Like, no wonder it just came from those life experiences, and the fact that like the way he explained it, how like Doug isn't popular, but Doug isn't also not popular. He's right there in the middle. He's a dude that just is there. And I was like, wow, that's a whole other thing to think about, because
it was just an average kid.
Yeah.
Which most people are.
Most people are.
Yeah,
You know,
I really like that. Yeah.
And we're coming from the 80s, where it's like everybody in an 80s movie is either like the nerd or the jock or the stoner, like Breakfast Club, you know, which I think is a great movie, but it's like, it's all the archetypes. And even that movie plays with them like it's not what you think. So I guess Breakfast Club is a bad example, but a lot of other like movies that imitated the Breakfast Club had like all that. And that's just not how most kids are. They're like you said, they're like Doug. They're just, I'm kind of in the middle. Like I'm kind of, I have friends, but I'm not popular, but I'm also not the total dork, you know?
Yeah. And even the girl that he liked, I mean, her voice, I mean, the fact how they found that voice, and I mean, but that even plays on that. Like, it doesn't do that stereotypical thing of like, well, if this is the girl he likes, we're going to give her this really like easy voice to listen to hear. Yeah. It's like the nanny, like she's like right in your face with her
voice.
It's
a little abrasive. Yeah.
But that's.
Yeah. I love the commercial clip that you got though, because I remembered that commercial.
Oh, really? Did you?
Yeah. I was
That's
like,
awesome.
Oh my God, I remember this commercial. And I thought it was great.
A little fun trivia. You know, like I said, I was getting clips wherever I could on YouTube. And I found a YouTube channel called Consumer Time Capsule. And that's where I found that clip. I was just searching for it. I was like, I got to find the clip that he's talking about. And I was searching and I found it. And I wrote the dude. I was like, can I use this clip? And he's like, yeah, what for? You know, and I told him. And much like all of us, he's like, no crap, you're making a Nickelodeon doc? This sounds amazing. So we got to talking. And he's like, yeah, we got talking on the phone about it. And then he was like, yeah. He's like, hey, can I tell you something? And I'm like, yeah, what's up? And he's like, I've got a piece of the aggro crag.
No.
Yeah.
Holy nostalgia.
Like I didn't even know
out of nowhere.
Well, as soon as I told him like I'm doing a Nickelodeon doc. He's like, oh, hey, can I call you and we can just talk about it?
Yes.
Yeah, because originally I was just reaching out to him because I wanted to use this mayonnaise commercial that had Patty Mayonnaise, the voice of it, on there. And he's like, oh, that's cool. You're making a Nickelodeon doc. He's like, I got to tell you something. I got a piece of the aggro crag.
Wow.
And I was like, what are the odds, you know? And so at the end of the movie, when the credits are rolling, we show a bunch of people, like fans, and there's a dude with an aggro crag, and that's him.
That's him?
Yeah.
Because I was going to say, like, I love that part of too at the end was you showing like this one, like it's like a gallery that has all the, looks like it has the nose from Double Dare, and it has the lockers and stuff. Yeah. And then that guy, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. And then like, you know, how that everybody's like realizing that there are people like
us. Yeah.
Show.
And it kind of mirrors like what Adam and I went through. We're like, is anybody else going to be like this? And yeah, the answer is yes. It started because when we started the documentary, we didn't know who we were going to get, you know, and we kind of wrote the plot of what we thought it would be, but you don't really know until you're editing. You know, you don't really know what it's. You kind of write. I always say you write a documentary twice. You know, you write it original. You should kind of have an idea, so you're not just going into it blind, asking people. You know, because you're wasting people's time asking them questions that you know aren't going to be in the documentary at all. So we interviewed some fans, and then we're like, God, there's really no room for them, you know, because we got so many people from Nickelodeon, and we were already struggling to get it to 90 minutes. We're like, there's no, where do we put them? And then we're like, oh, the end credits, you know, we'll give those people. And there's a company called Mondo that you might have heard of, that they're based out of Austin, and they do a lot of like re-releases, like posters and stuff. And they have a gallery. And that was actually one of the very first things we ever filmed before we would film any interviews. We, cause Mondo is based out of Austin, Texas. So it was just, we could just hop over there. So we just went there. They were doing a Nickelodeon gallery right when Adam and I decided we were going to do this. Wow. So it was literally the first thing we did, where we just filmed a bunch of people. And then it was great that we found a place to put it in the documentary.
Wow. Yeah, that was cool. That was really cool. I thought you guys like set that up. That's awesome. That like, I know, just so serendipitous, like happened.
It just happened. They were doing a gallery right when we were doing a documentary.
That's amazing.
So we did it. And those Mondo, if anyone isn't familiar, check out their posters and stuff. They've got really neat, like kind of artistic re-releases of like movie posters and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Did everything that you wanted to get in there got in there, or would you feel like, were there things that you wish you got in the doc that you weren't able to get, or things that you had to cut out that you're just like, oh, I wish kind of put that in there?
I mean, it's funny, like Adam and I pitched this so hard as a docuseries. We tried to get people to buy it as a docuseries, and nobody would. And then once it's out, everyone's like, this should be a docuseries. And we're like, yeah, we tried, and nobody was like, we couldn't get anyone to buy it. And I wish somehow, I don't know what the legality of this is, but if either we could maybe do a Blu-ray that's extended, or do like a Snyder cut later on that's like 4 hours long. Did you watch
that movie, by the way?
I tried. I watched a little bit of it. I was like, why is this in 4:3? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. That's so funny that you said that. I thought something went wrong with my computer, and I'm like, what? And then I'm like, 4:3. We're not watching this on IMAX right now. Like, everyone knows it's being like, we're in the middle of what we're in, and like it's being released on HBO Max. Like, what are you doing? Like, But I will say, like, a better storyline.
Big time. And I think that it's awesome that happened. I hope that happens more now, that because you always hear stories about how people are like, oh yeah, the movie that came out was nothing like what I made at all. You know, like you hear about that guy, Josh Trank, who did that Fantastic Four movie. He's like, oh yeah, that's not even close to the movie that I wanted to make at all. They totally ripped it apart and made it, you know. So I'd love to see more of that happen, where it's like, let's do both. Because I get it. Like, they could never have put it out as 4 hours to begin with. But you can do the director's cut, you know, more a mainstream release of the director's cut. But, you know, Adam and I are looking into, like, could we do a 4-part series or something like that? Because we have so much footage. Much footage. It's insane.
So were there shows that didn't make it in?
They're not really. Everybody that we talked to, we used pretty much. There was we started working on a Wild and Crazy Kids segment. and that didn't make it in because we couldn't get the footage from Wild and Crazy Kids. It's there's not high quality. That's never been re-released, and the only footage we could find, and we didn't have enough behind the scenes footage. We tried to always get footage that both we could have at least two people. We wanted to have at least two people on a show.
Right.
And then we wanted to have like footage that people hadn't seen, and there it was just this whole thing, and we couldn't find out where we wanted to put it, so that part kind of got cut. And then the Nick at Night part got cut. So there were no all the interviews pretty much that we did. There was maybe 3 interviews that we did that didn't unfortunately make it in there. But everybody's interview was for like an hour and a half. So we could have done like Doug, Rugrats, Ren, and Stimpy, and Rocco, like the original Nicktoons, a full 45-minute episode just on that. Like maybe put 2 or 3 shows for each one. And do like a game show episode or something like that, because we had so much footage. It's funny, nobody wants to buy a docu. They're nervous to buy it, but then they're saying they want it at the same time. It's just weird.
That's weird, because it's funny that they're nervous right now, because I'm not in the business, but everyone's just watching things and no one has anything to watch anymore.
I know,
because we've binged watched for a year. So you can't watch The Wire anymore. Although I haven't watched The Wire and I need to, I was told. But why wouldn't you? Because
I know it's content. Like people. It was only after the movie came out and it got some traction and people liked it that they're like, oh, you should have made this into a docuseries. Yeah, remember we were trying to sell you guys on that? They're like, oh, I don't think there's Nickelodeon warrants a docu-series,
Wow.
It's like, well, if collecting exotic tigers can warrant a docu-series, I think that Nickelodeon could.
Right? Sure. Oh, come on. That's that
would have been, that's
short-sighted, because there was so much going on. I mean, we could go on and on. We didn't even talk about the cube thing. But what I mean is there's so much in the foundation of what happens even before you even get to so much of this amazing stuff that you guys put together.
Yeah.
That a docuseries would have been, why not? It's one of the most influential networks probably of all time at this point. So I think that, that was kind of short-sighted on people. But I think what you guys were able to accomplish in this documentary was just astounding to me. I think hopefully that what happens is that people do want more, and that you have footage, and then you would get more funding to kind of keep digging, because there's so much there that people would, I think, really love.
It's already there. We all we would have to do is re-edit it. It's we wouldn't even really have to. We could shoot a couple more interviews, but it's with very little effort, we could expand this.
This podcast is brought to you by Lithology Brewing Company, owned and operated by Manny Quillo, one of the co-hosts of the Nostalgia Test podcast. Find Lithology Brewing at lithologybrewing.com. It's based out of Long Island, Farmingdale, Main Street, 12 beers on tap, New York wine and spirits as well. So you keep saying you sold it. How many places did you sell it to?
So we sold, we kind of found this out. The way it works is really the idea of selling right to Netflix or right to Hulu or right to HBO, something that happens so rarely. It does happen. I don't know if you guys saw Class Action Park.
Yes.
I
love that. That documentary is
What did you think?
I liked it.
Have you been to Class Action Park?
No, I never had.
Action Park?
I have.
Well, we live Dan and I grew up near there. Okay, so it's not that far away from where we grew up. We grew up on Long Island, and that was where you went. Right.
Yeah.
I went there 3 times.
No joke.
Yeah, man.
I went there once. Once was enough.
You know how they say it was a badge of honor, you survived Action Park?
Yeah.
Yeah. Every time I went, that loop thing was always closed.
Thank God.
And there was always the theory, someone died on that thing. Someone got stuck. And they're no way. It was everything about that documentary was so great, because I was I wish they interviewed me, because oh my God, it was exactly what that thing was. I'm oh, this was real. And it was so crazy to know that 15-year-olds were running a park. It's crazy to think about that now. Is insane. I remember going off the slide and I was supposed to be 99 pounds. I'm not telling them that I'm 95 pounds, right? They're go. I didn't touch the slide till the bottom. That means I was just falling.
Oh,
I was just falling. And I then eventually hit the slide. I was oh, I could have died on that thing. So
Yeah.
Easily, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, they had like cliff diving. No one was watching. Like there was a person watching you, but there's like go, and people were
It
just
was-
running and jumping off. Like no one cared, and people could like.
Jeez. I thought that doc was really cool. But you know, they sold right to HBO, so it happens, but it's like so rare. But the majority of the time, like you sell to a distributor. This is just what I've learned is like, and then they get it everywhere else. And
Okay.
we are working with an awesome distributor called Gravitas Ventures. After we had a couple of mishaps. People always are like, the film debuted in 2018 and didn't come out until late 2020. What happened? It was a whole nightmare where this company that we really thought was going to be the company that made us, we came and was going to buy it and then tried to not put it out and shelve it. It was just a whole nightmare. We were able to get it back. And then Gravitas came in and was like, we want it. And they're the same people that own the Ren and Stimpy doc. And they also have Wolfman's Got Nards. Have you seen that? It's the Monster Squad doc.
What?
Oh god.
Yeah, dude.
no,
It's
really?
amazing. Check it out.
That's our like one of our tests coming up next year during the Halloween. I was like,
maybe you could get him on there. His name is Andre. I don't know him or anything, but the main kid, I think his name was Sean in Monster Squad. He's the director of the film.
Stop.
He directed the Monster Squad doc.
Wolfman's Got Nards.
And that's what the documentary is called. Wolfman's Got Nards. So they had a lot of documentaries, and I had friends that had sold to Gravitas, and they're great. They're awesome. And so they put it out, and they've now, I mean, right now, anywhere you can rent or buy movies digitally, like transactional video on demand is what I've learned the technical term for it. It's there. iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, Redbox Digital, that's a thing. Fandango, Vudu, like any of those places where you can like, you know, pay, and it's not that much money to like buy it or rent it. You can do it. It's everywhere.
Oh, everyone's got to watch it. I mean, it's really amazing.
So you sold to them. And then,
Gravitas bought it, and now they're selling it to all the other places. Yeah, so they're getting it.
Like, I'm getting deep on this. Do you make extra for certain sales or just?
Yeah. So the way that it works is every time they sell it, I mean, they get a percentage and we get a percentage, basically.
Okay. So it's like beer distributing. Like we sell them. And
yeah, exactly. They're kind of like a distributor. They're like a sales company. Yeah. So they're the ones that got it on iTunes, and thank God they did, because it's something that like you think like I'll just do it myself. It's like, nah. They got us written up in Rolling Stone and the Nerdist and all stuff that we could have never done ourselves, you know?
Yeah, they got a whole crew.
Just getting it, they got a whole crew. Let the professionals do what they do so that I can just focus on the more artistic stuff. But they got us everywhere. Like, I mean, it's everywhere. It's everywhere, like, that you can rent movies online. They've done a great job. And it's been out for a little while now. And hopefully, you know, who knows where it'll go next. They're continuing to get it more and more places. Blu-ray and DVD is also available on Amazon too for people that still like a physical copy.
Oh wow, nice. Great!
They designed all of it, and it looks good, and it's they got it out there. That's the most important thing.
I love it and wish you luck on it. And, I can't wait to blow this thing up and keep telling people that they need to rent and buy it.
Everyone has to rent, buy it, watch it with your friends. This is like one of those things that people need to just, it's something that you could keep watching and find something new, like when you see it, because there's so much in it. There's so much going on. And it also made me want to go back and watch these shows again and then rewatch other things. So I feel like there's just like an amazing relationship between like your documentary and these shows and go and returning to them and stuff like that. And it really was an amazing experience. And I feel, it was such a privilege to kind of see it and even sit here and talk to you. I feel like there was just, we could go on for hours. I have like,
we could. You know what you're doing is also, you're going to get old friends to start talking to each other when we're all allowed to like actually hang out with each other.
I know, right?
And someone brings up like, oh, did you see the Nickelodeon documentary? And then instead of Googling, you could actually be like, yeah, Doug was on. Like, I feel like you guys are going to cause like more social interactions.
I hope
more
so.
This comes out.
Yeah.
So
I hope so. I mean, it's a very positive documentary, and the world is such a dark, crazy, cynical place now. Yeah. And you know, if you just want to kind of get a fun, nostalgic blast, I hope that we can give that to some people, you know, and it gives you something to shoot for too, you know, maybe the world can be like that again, but even better, you know, an even better place than it was.
Well, before we go though, hold on. I'm putting this. I'm gonna ask you. Our first movie. I don't know if you heard our first episode, but I have an obsession with Cocktail. Did you ever see that movie?
With Tom Cruise. Yeah.
Okay. What's your feeling about Cocktail?
God, it's been so long.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like whenever you could make a movie like the over the top. The 80s were like, you know, like, let's make a movie about arm wrestling. Oh, cool. Let's make a movie about a guy who's like a bartender and makes cocktails. Like, okay. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah. It was like the original mixology movie.
Yeah.
We dissect it. I love it because of how cheesy and bad it is. It's bad. I know that. And like, if you listen to the episode, Dan hates it. And I have this like fascination with Tom Cruise that Tom Cruise is just Tom Cruise in every movie.
Yeah, totally.
Like in 80s and 90s, like they're entertaining. Like, you know, and that movie has such a bad rating on Rotten Tomatoes that I want it to be better. And because there's been other movies that we reviewed. I'm like, how is this better? How is this rated better than Cocktail? And I was like, the movie's about nothing.
Right.
But it's so cheesy. I think it's so good. Like there's so many one-liners that Coughlin, his basically Obi-Wan of bartending.
Oh my God.
Is him.
That's right.
It's so good.
Like that has a 7% Rotten Tomatoes rating, and we talked about Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and that has a better rating than. And we were like, how did that happen? But like, it was just one of those movies that started this whole podcast, and like to me, I felt it was just a nostalgic movie. I can't let it pass that line into being good.
You know, I know it so well, Scott, that if I start watching it and you shut off the volume,
you can say every word.
Yeah. It was my mom's favorite movie. So I used to watch it with my mom all the time.
So weird.
Which is such a weird movie to watch with your mom. Think about it.
Totally.
There was a show that was on Nickelodeon. Like so many of their shows hold up. So many Nickelodeon shows hold up, but there's one that absolutely does not. And everybody should go watch this. It was called 15, and it was a soap opera for little kids. Exactly. No one ever remembers it because it didn't last very long. And everybody that watched it forgot about it because it was so bad. But it was a soap opera for little kids. So right there, it's flawed from the beginning because little kids don't want to watch a soap opera. And it's like dramatic, over the top acting. But here's the thing. It was the first ever acting job, or like real acting job, of Ryan Reynolds. Deadpool.
Oh,
wow.
And he's like 13. And he's like, I just want to be in a band. And he's like, oh, they kicked me out of my band. Like he's so upset about getting kicked out of a band. It's all Canadian. It's all Canadian. The Canadian accents are so thick. I did a podcast called That Aged Well, where kind of similar. They
kind of like this,
but they really take apart like stuff that was horrible and really take the piss out of it, you know. And they're like, you want to be on there, but we're going to be making fun of something. So what Nickelodeon do you want to make fun of? And I was like, can it be 15? Because one, that show deserves to get made fun of, and also like I didn't really want to make fun of one of the shows that like I interviewed somebody for.
Yeah.
Like, hey, thanks for the free interview. I'm going to make fun of your show now.
Yeah.
And so they agreed to do it. And so we just roasted 15. It's like, check it out. It's a ridiculous show. It's like, nobody acts like this. It's like, it's like Troll 2 level of bad.
Oh
like
my
the
God.
dialogue is just like, what? Like nobody speaks like this.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Scott, thank you so much. This was so much fun. We are so happy that you were able to come on, that you reached out, and this was amazing for us. I think that, I don't know, Manny. I mean,
there's nothing. I'm more than I keep repeating it, but this is a really great film. I'm really pumped for you guys. I can't wait to see what else you guys are coming up down the line, and I hope the production company gets even more shots of doing stuff. And I was really excited. And like you've given me and Dan plenty of lists to go back to these shows and just gonna watch them and try to put them to the test. But I already know that pretty much everything that's in that.
I'm definitely going back to watch Pete and Pete. I have to now.
Yeah,
I have to.
So
but
you should. Pete and Pete is fantastic.
But
And
everyone,
it was somewhere close to where you guys were. I think it was like based out of like New Jersey or something. I think is where it was all shot.
Yeah, it was serious, man. That part, and this is a nostalgia test tangent. And that's a nostalgia test tangent. But that part when he's letting go of his
Oh my God,
his imaginary friend or what, and like growing up, and I was like, oh man, just imagine like that.
Yeah.
Being that age,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
that hit me. I can remember that hitting me in the feels back then when I watched it, even. And then definitely now where you're like, God, I can remember that, like that time period where you're a kid, but you're not a little kid anymore. And you kind of have to let go of these things. You just know it's time, but you're not really. I can remember like playing with toys, it's
just
like,
gonna say that.
I went from being proud of my toys when my friends would come over. I'm like, look at all my action figures, to now like when my friends would come over, I'd be like hiding them, because I'm like, oh, if they find out I play with toys, they're going to like make fun of me.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is time to stop doing this stuff, and it's just such a bittersweet time because, something new is coming up, like dating and all that fun stuff is right. But it is sad that you have to let go. Like just when you're comfortable with who you are as like a kid, you got to let that person go and go into a totally new world.
Yeah.
That's crazy because funny thing is that you went through that. That means your friends who you're hiding it from was going through the same thing.
Totally.
Like I was telling my wife that I remember the day that the last time I played with toys in the tub.
Wow.
And I was like,
wow.
She's like, you remember that day? I'm like, yeah, because it was like I told myself like it's time to be done with this.
It's time to stop. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, I can't believe as a kid I thought that. Like I actually said, like, think about like kids like, oh, they're immature, but like that's like a kind of a very mature like thing to think about. Like, no, this will be the last time I do this. Like I have to let it go. And that's bittersweet, man. That's tough. Yeah.
Wow.
And now we're all living nostalgically and want to go back. It's like we have friends that have like they love to show their toys that they have and stuff. So
I know
it all comes full circle.
Yeah. Wow. Well, everybody go out, watch the Orange Years, the Nickelodeon story. It's amazing. It's gonna hit you in all the right spaces, and really it's gonna make you just like really love and appreciate not just your childhood again, but like all the amazing hard work that went into making your childhood probably one of the greatest childhoods of all time. I mean, seriously, that's what I felt like after watching this. And Scott, thank you once again for coming on. We're totally appreciative and for your time, and everyone, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Shoot us a message. Let us know what you think on the website and when the episode goes up. And that's it. Thanks, everyone.
Dan, Manny, the pleasure was all mine. I had a blast. And if you ever need anything Nickelodeon related, please give me a shout.
Oh,
of course.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Oh, we're putting you to test in some episode.
Yeah.
We're going to call you out and you're going to do a whole nostalgia test podcast test. How crazy it gets, and the tangents will get crazy.
Oh boy. So, well, everyone, thanks so much. We'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please subscribe to the Nostalgia Test podcast to know when new episodes drop. Don't forget to leave us 5 stars and a positive review so more people can find the podcast. Share your thoughts and memories on today's topic on our Twitter @NostalgiaTest and on Instagram @TheNostalgiaTest. Tune in next time because you never know what pop culture will pop up on The Nostalgia Test.